Hello friends and welcome to Figure Study, where we're taking a look at another oldie but goodie, and actually a very goodie, and that is Classics Voyager Optimus Prime. Before I get into looking at all of this, I need to apologize because I teased looking at this figure over a year and a half ago. Yeah, due to various reasons that did not happen when I was intending it to happen, but I have the figure now, and so we can look at it now. And it's Classics Prime. I mean, everyone's done a video on this thing, so this is really just kind of me getting it out of the way. I don't really know what I can say about this that hasn't already been said, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. It's definitely got an Optimus Prime feel to it, in that it's a somewhat boxy truck cab that is red with a blue kind of back end. Transforms in a very similar way with the arms and torso and head up here, and this is all legs. It does have that weird kind of obvious robot toes jutting out of the back, though it's not too terrible, and it does at least try to line up a little bit better. I do also really like how the accessories are part of the alt mode. It does create problems in that if you lose the accessories, the alt mode doesn't look that great. But I think it's cool, and I also always appreciate it when the accessories have a place to go that doesn't look ridiculous. It's kind of more of a, I want to say, modernized-ish Prime truck cab. I mean, granted, this is an older figure at this point, so what is modern now is not, probably not modern back when this was made. But I appreciate the updates. I don't mind the little whatever this is, wind vane, wind scoop, airfoil, whatever, on the top here. Don't mind the smokestacks on the back. They are definitely a bit not smokestacky looking when you're looking at it from the back, but from the front, it gets the point across. It's a little bit weird in its shape, though, I will say. Like, the actual, like, where the driver would sit is up really high, and there's so much engine and bumper down here. It does look a little bit weird, though I don't know how accurate this is to any kind of real-world vehicle. I've seen some trucks that are just massive, so this could be one of those. The thing that kind of throws me off with this truck mode specifically, though, is right here. This lip. Again, don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's just a little bit abrupt how it kind of is this almost a sheer cliff face of a front of a truck, and then it just comes right in, and then you get the slope for the windshield. I'm guessing it was just because of geometry and engineering that they had to do that, but I feel like it probably would look better as a truck if this actual window section came forward a little bit and lined up a little bit better with what's going on up here. Because looking at it, even from this angle, it kind of looks like this whole section needs to just slide forward like a few centimeters. And the detailing is nice. There's not a ton of paint on the legs, which is totally fine because, they're the legs, and also this part of the truck I feel like is much less interesting than the cab itself. So you've got silver on the rims, which are molded nicely, and then a little bit of black back here, but it is covered up by these bits. There's also some really nice molding on the cab, and of course those not quite the same silver stripes that are on the sort of classic G1 Optimus Prime, but still silver stripes along a red cab, definitely an Optimus Prime feel. You do still get the cab lights up top, very, very big bumper and grille. I do like that they painted the headlights though, and the silver around it. And you also have the decorated airfoil up there, which is, again, I don't mind the shape, I don't mind the silhouette that it makes. None of that really bothers me. Because this is, it's something slightly different for Optimus Prime, and thank goodness for that. Granted, this came out many years ago, but still, I could do with a break from slavish G1 homage. It's a little bit exhausting. But my issue with the airfoil here is more the fact that the deco just kind of stops. Like, I feel like if this silver kind of came down a little bit into the cab a little bit more, it would look more like something that's a part of the cab and not just something that's stuck on top. That may be something from the actual trucks that use these kinds of things, like maybe they are completely separate pieces that are usually decorated in ways that just separate them out like that. I don't know, but I just think it would have been kind of nice if that deco came down into the cab itself. That's all I'm saying. That's about all I can say for Classics Prime's cab. It's, Optimus Prime-y, but not exactly. It's different, and I like different, and it's nice and solid. Size-wise, it's also decently chunky. You can see him next to a more standard deluxe size figure. He's big, Downshift is basically about the size of his blue section, which stands to reason. And here he is with the duck tank. Alrighty. Transformation time. So before I start speeding things up, I'm just gonna pop off his extra bits here so that you can see what I'm talking about, how the truck cab, it kind of loses something when you remove the accessories, so I do feel like they're kind of necessary for this. Anyway, for the weapons real quick, or accessories, just going to fold this in half. And I like how this works, how you've got this peg that's actually got an angle to it, because when you fold open the airfoil, it actually goes right into the sculpt there, so you don't even really notice the peg. I mean, you can kind of see like the spot where it is, but like it just, silhouette-wise, it follows that curve really nicely. And then there's the peg down here that pegs into the truck, but then when you fold it in, these kind of go around that peg and make it disappear. Reveal this peg instead. It's cool engineering. Anyway, just flip that out, and there is his big old gun thing, which we will look at more later. And for the smokestacks, I just want to flip these out, flip these out, which is kind of a pain. And there we go. And so with all of this open, you then turn this in, sandwich it together, and you get a pretty convincing looking gun. I actually really like the smokestacks as a gun. A little bit squared, boxy, and flat looking for smokestacks, but as a gun, pretty darn cool. But we will look at that in more detail later, and now we get to the transformation proper. And here we have one of the most classics of Optimus Primes in robot mode, and this robot mode definitely has some issues with regards to kibble and whatnot, but it still holds up remarkably well. Transformation does some interesting things, in particular with the torso, and like that kind of upper body twist around is something that I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like this is the first time we ever got that in an Optimus Prime toy, and that's been kind of used for future Optimus Primes, like even as recently as the Studio Series version from the Bumblebee movie. It's a neat trick, and it's a good way to kind of take the original grille and move that around and reveal like a more natural looking grille midsection. I really like this. Like the engineering, as I said, very interesting. There is some kibble stuff with like the bits on the arms and all the junk on the back, but like the junk on the back, I feel like is pretty easy to ignore. It's really the arm flaps that are the most, let's say, egregious kibble issue for me, but even then it's pretty easy to ignore. It just makes me really appreciate how well this toy still holds up. Like, it's still very much Optimus Prime. It's got a lot of the same general color placement with like the red upper body and forearms, gray kind of pelvis and thigh area, and then blue legs. It's got the truck windows on the chest, the lights up top, which, they don't really paint those lights anymore in most of the Optimus Prime figures that come out. A lot of what's here still very much says Optimus Prime, but like it's a much more interesting silhouette than like the typical G1 boxiness. It's almost got kind of like a, I don't quite want to say super robot, but maybe anime-esque kind of midsection here with how well things kind of come in. It gives him almost like a little bit of an hourglass figure, because he does have a rather tiny waist. But I like all that. I like how the shoulders, while they're still kind of boxy, they have a slightly more triangular shape to them. The legs are like these giant robot boots now instead of the more typical Optimus Prime legs. And I appreciate how the knee pads, when they're down, they more or less cover up the venting on the shins and just kind of look like junk that would be on a truck, I guess, if you're looking at it as like a truck bed or the back of a truck cab thing. But then you flip them up And they not only reveal that detail, but they add a little bit more color in the knee section. They kind of change what's going on up here with the molding. They cover up the black little joints around the knees there. It does some cool stuff. Very simple engineering, really, but it does some really cool stuff. And there's also some really nice, I like the molded details that these flaps reveal that were just the sides of the truck. But like they come down, they cover up the wheels mostly, and you get some really interesting, I guess, kind of like venting detail here. These almost look like these could be rocket boosters, but they only go like, that way, which is a little weird. I feel like the only thing that really keeps this from standing up completely to a more modern figure is the fact that he doesn't have any ankle tilts and he doesn't have any wrist swivels, which is kind of like, who really cares? I feel like he pulls off the no ankle tilts thing just fine, and there are plenty of figures that we get nowadays that don't have wrist swivels. There's just so much to appreciate here, but I'm going to repeat myself if I keep going on about it. So instead, we'll just take a look at the sculpting in a little bit more detail. So again, there's just some really nice molding through here, and those classic Optimus Prime vents on the shins, like I mentioned. Black instead of silver or blue, depending on which model you're looking at, but that's fine because this does kind of do its own thing. Again, those knee pads, and I like the color separation in the thighs here too, how it's kind of like blue and gray rather than just a gray slab going all the way down. And then in the pelvis area, there's some nice yellow details, including little headlights of a sort. Even though they don't exactly look like any headlights that were on the truck itself, it's still a nice little detail. And the more classic Prime midriff right in here, which is it's a statement. It's a string of words that I just put together. Really, this whole torso is just very Optimus Prime. It's definitely more slim in the waist section, but this is like, you look at this without everything else around it, and it's like, yeah, that's an Optimus Prime torso. And for the shoulders, they did add some blue here, which is a bit different than what we're used to seeing, at least before this, with Optimus Primes, but I'm fine with it. He does have yellow on the forearms, though the design and placement of the yellow is definitely different than the triangles that he usually gets. But it still hits the same color beats, which I like. And the head is also very Optimus Prime, but kind of like almost anime looking and slightly angry. He does have that kind of typical blue helmet with the ears and the little crest thingy on top and the silver mouth plate. One thing that kind of stinks about this figure is those eyes they don't light pipe well. I put a light directly behind it and it barely lit up, so that's something that I'm probably going to end up painting in the future. But anyway, yeah, the sculpting is great. I'm into the yellow on the forehead crest and definitely that silver faceplate. You gotta have the silver faceplate on Optimus Prime. I just wish that the eyes actually were, visible. And around the back, things are pretty solid looking and also nicely molded. I like how some of the truck cab kind of folds around the backs of the forearms to both keep the fists from being able to fold back in and to just kind of clean up a little bit. This junk on the back, as I said, not great, but it's fine. Like, it gets out of the way when you need it to, like just by bringing that up. That frees up the waist swivel. And when you're looking at it from the front, it's kind of like, yeah, it's junk in the back, but really, is this any worse than Studio Series 38 Optimus Prime? I don't think so. The arm flaps, though, they are a thing. I mean, I definitely think it'd be better if these were not here and they had like a different way to kind of fold away, but I'm so used to seeing this figure like this at this point, I think we all are, that this kind of stops becoming kibble and just sort of reads as, oh yeah, that's his forearms. They're just there. They're a feature, not a bug. So, before we move on to size comparisons, I do want to talk about his weapons real quick. So we've got the smokestacks that become a blaster, like I mentioned, and like I said before, they don't really work that well as smokestacks, but I think they work really well as a double-barreled gun. I like the detailing, I like the silver paint at the top there, which is necessary for the smokestacks, but it also is just like a nice kind of visual difference with this and the black plastic around it when it's in gun mode. He looks pretty darn cool wielding that. And then there's this thing, which I'm less into this. I like the transformation of whatever blaster this is called, and I like the way that the airfoil is designed and the way it folds up. This silver ends up actually kind of continuing through this whole section of the gun just because of the way this folds around. It's actually really clever how the design kind of integrates that way. I don't know if it was planned, but it's really clever. But like the overall shape of the gun is kind of weird, and it looks kind of goofy when he's holding it. It's a little weird. I prefer with this one, I've seen people do this before, and I'm definitely there too. I prefer to have it like as an underslung thing. Yeah, you don't get the silver from it, but I don't know, this just works better for me. It's not like this weird banana-shaped thing hanging off of his arm. Now it's more like, it's an underslung gun, and having a giant gun being underslung like that makes it like, it's just kind of like connotations that I've picked up from pop culture, I guess, but seeing a large gun being held underslung like that makes it feel like this is the far more powerful gun of the two that he has. There's just something about a big gun being held upside down, like from the bottom, that makes it feel like it's gonna do some serious damage. And this is a look that I like very much. It's a neat figure, like I said. It's a classic, for lack of a better term. And I'm positive nobody's ever made that comment about it before. Anyway, let's put Prime over here so that we can get to our size comparisons. Here he is with a standard deluxe, and it's interesting how he's definitely bigger than Downshift. Though he's not quite as bulky, it almost feels like a lot of his bulk is actually in that gun or hidden around the back. Whereas Downshift, it's pretty much unapologetically on his calves and in his chest. And before we close things out, there are a couple more size comparisons too. So first off, we've got Classics Prime with not quite Classics Megatron. This is the Henkei version, and I have done a little bit of customizing on him as well. Regardless, the detailing that was done on him is not important right now. We're talking about Prime. So yeah, this is how Henkei Megatron and Classics Prime look together. I definitely prefer the Henkei look for this Megatron because it's just more classic Megatron colors. And for absolutely no reason whatsoever he lied, here is Classics Prime with Energon Wing Saber of all things. Oh yes, we are gonna do it. And here he is with the duck tank. And you know what? I was going to do a separate Fan Mode Friday video for this, because, it is a fan mode. But, let's roll it all into one video. What do you say? Let's just do it. We are going to combine these two in an unofficial capacity, but it's going to look awesome. Now, I want to state, before I start breaking all this down and doing stuff, this is not my idea. I did not come up with this fan mode. I do not take credit for it. It is not my idea. I got this idea off of TFW. Link to the thread in the description below if you want to check it out. I will also try and include the name of the forum poster who came up with this in the first place. So yeah, not my idea. I'm probably still going to get people asking me why I ripped off someone's idea, because people seem to do that even though I clearly state that it is not my thing and somebody else came up with it, but whatever. We are going to combine these two, and yes, it is going to be awesome, and it is not an official combination, but weirdly it works surprisingly well. With Wing Saber, we are going to rip him apart, just like we were doing for the combination with Energon Prime. So getting Prime out of the way here, just going to rip him in half, fold his head halves away, rip off his legs, and those are just fine the way they are. These bits, just going to fold this up, and I do something a little bit different with the forearms here. What I like to do is rotate them this way, and then angle them out. I just move this flap back to make rotating this bit a little bit easier because it doesn't crash into stuff. And then I bend it up here, like this. The reason I do that is because this flap covers up the kind of unsightly joint back here. And actually, that's the wrong joint. I want to bend it on this joint, not the one up here. So there we go. And then rotate the Wing Saber fist around so that it's facing forward. And to just give you an idea, let me fold this up real quick. Just give you an idea of what I mean when I say I'm rotating it the other way. Like if you rotate it this way, it still works as an arm, but then you've got this joint just right there staring you in the face, and here I feel like it's just a little bit cleaner looking because that flap kind of covers it up. So just gonna do this. Rotate it back around this way, and bring that up. Rotate that around, and there we go. So for the upper body, there's no, because it's not an official transformation, there's no right way to arrange the arms. So I'm just going to go with the way that I've been doing it. So this is probably a little bit off model from the example in the original thread, but as long as it works, you know? So just going to, first off, get the arms somewhat back to their default position, as though we were going back into truck mode. And now, the most important thing to do for this is to have the shoulders rotated forward like this, and you want to angle them back so that they're kind of at a slight angle, and you want the arms pointed in. So what I've been doing is kind of coming up like this, and that kind of creates like this pillar over his shoulder. And the reason you want the shoulder oriented like this is because Wing Saber's arms are going to, these little ports that Energon Prime's arms plug into are going to kind of friction over the shoulders like that. So you want to have a decent amount of surface area for this to grip to, and it's not going to work as well if you have it like this, because there's just not as much space, especially with the arm there. Like it's barely gripping, so you want it to be at an angle so that it can kind of go around like that. That's just the basic rule of thumb. You don't necessarily have to orient the arms this way, like I said. It's just you want to make sure that the shoulders are like this and there's enough clearance for those arms to friction in place. So with that, I'm going to bring this in and bring this down just to kind of get it out of the way. Rotate this around, bring that up, bring that in and in, and we'll just keep that out. Okay. And bring that in, down. And so we're left with something that's kind of a mess. And it's not entirely symmetrical, but again, nothing's locking in place, so it's not going to be symmetrical. That's just how it's going to be. But as I said, the important thing to note is you want to have the shoulders oriented like this, that there's as much surface area for those arms to grip to as possible. Now for the legs, you just bend them 90 degrees and bring down the little knee flaps. This is absolutely the easiest part of the entire thing, because that's all you do. And then we just start attaching bits. So these will slot into Energon Wing Saber's legs here, and this is why you want the kneecaps pointing down, so that they just slot into that crevice there. These clips on the inside of Wing Saber's legs will actually clip around the molding on Prime's knees. It's not infallible in its connection. It can get knocked loose. It can kind of, as you can see, wiggle out of place a little bit, but it does hold. You just want to be careful as you're kind of manipulating things. It will hold in place. It is actually a pretty secure connection, and that will rather seamlessly blend with his legs, and even like around the back. It's not too bad with the kibble going on back there, all things considered. Now, we're going to stick on the arms. Like I showed before, it just frictions into place over those shoulders. Like so. And lastly, because we have the weapons, these can peg into Wing Saber's fists. However, especially with this gun, the smokestacks gun, it's got a very shallow peg. There's not a lot of space between the grip and the peg itself, and the pegs on Wing Saber's fists are a bit tight compared to like the pegs themselves. So this could pop out at a moment's notice if you bump it like too hard. But I mean, it's stuck in there. It's not coming out. It's just something to be aware of. It sticks in there. It's really kind of a tight fit. So you don't want to push too hard either. But after all is said and done, there we have Classics Prime combined with Energon Wing Saber, and that is utterly ridiculous, but I also absolutely love it. Doesn't really have much in the way of posability. I mean, you can get some stuff out of the hips, like the forward, backward, in, out, the rotation of the thigh. And because his knees are pretty well articulated, you can actually bend them a little bit more, but because the connection here isn't super solid, I would recommend against doing too much with that unless you're extremely careful, because, those legs could pop off while you're manipulating the legs. The arms, because of how things are oriented, you really don't get any rotation up here. You could possibly get a little bit of forward butterfly up there, and then you're basically just limited to what's going on up here. So like a little bit of rotation, a little bit of a elbow, a little bit of in and out, and then the wrist swivels. And then you get the, you do still maintain the waist swivel and the head swivel for Classics Prime. And it does hold. Like, it holds together, despite not being an official combination. It's definitely a bit of a mess around the back, but I think it's okay. And the midsection is definitely, this is a very thin waist for Prime, with all that armor and junk on him, but with all the stuff that's kind of behind him, and you've got this wing that goes back, it almost makes it feel like this big wing continues all the way around. I know this part back here is from his bumper, but just the shape of it kind of feels like it goes all the way across, and it kind of masks that extremely trim waist a little bit better. And just because, let's do some size comparisons. So here he is all unofficially combined next to a standard-ish size deluxe. Here he is with Henkei Megatron / Classics Megatron, if you just imagine it in a more gaudy color scheme. And here he is with the Duck Tank. Alright, and that is gonna do it for Classics Optimus Prime and his unofficial combination with Energon Wing Saber. The combination is very cool, but Classics Prime on his own is a very, very solid action figure. Just as a standalone, he's really neat, and I think like anyone who's into collecting Transformers for any reason should probably have one, because he really does still stand up remarkably well. I know I keep saying it, but he really is a classic, so the name works. I also love how this toy, even though it was never designed to do it, integrates surprisingly well with Energon Wing Saber. It's so weird, but it's kind of perfect. Unfortunately, for anyone who's curious, you cannot get it to work the other way around with the red bits for Wing Saber as legs and the blue bits as arms. The problem is that the legs can still connect. Not quite as well as the blue ones, but they do still connect. But the blue arms do not friction over the shoulders. The shape of the cavity down there, the way that things are kind of spread out, it just doesn't work, which is unfortunate because I kind of prefer that combination. But hey, at least here the blue and the red kind of spread out properly, so like Classics Prime's blue goes into Wing Saber's blue, and this red goes into Wing Saber's red. But yeah, as I was saying, Classics Prime just as a standalone figure is great. And whatever you all think of Classics Optimus Prime, or even this bizarre unofficial combination, which, as I said, is not my idea, link to the original thread and credit to the TFW poster who came up with it in the description down below. Whatever your thoughts on any of that, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. And remember, art is more than meets the eye.